Hello juniors, I hope everyone is doing well, everyone is safe and healthy and staying inside and all those kinds of things. This video, one of the things that I think maybe is lacking in this kind of blended learning that we're doing, where you're only getting study sync assignments every week, one a week, is that added teacher instruction. And so I'm hoping that creating a video like this will be able to maybe fill in that gap. I'm hoping to post one of these every week, each one linked with the text that you've been asked to study for the week, and each one hopefully elaborating on what you've read, assuming that you've read the text for the week, elaborating on it and giving you some added information and pointing you in the right direction so that you'll be able to maybe better answer the questions that we've asked you to answer. So that's kind of where I'm headed with this, the reason why I'm making these videos. First and foremost though, I'll just say I am sorry that we left off where we did. We left off near the end of The Great Gatsby, and unfortunately the way that we're doing this is all English classes together, and they weren't reading The Great Gatsby, and so that's why these assignments, and also you don't have access to the book, but that's why these assignments don't have to do with The Great Gatsby, and we kind of left you hanging there in a way. But let me just tell you, my plan is to hopefully make some videos about The Great Gatsby as well later on, and I mean obviously those won't be for grading. They'll just be so that you can finish the book with me, and I'm not sure exactly what that will be yet, but I do want to provide some closure for those of you who are invested in the story and want to know what happens with Gatsby and Daisy and Nick and Tom and everyone else. So just let you know that's my plan, is to do that eventually. I don't know, let me know in the comments section, not of YouTube but of Google Classroom. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about The Great Gatsby. If you're dying to know what happens, hopefully I'll be able to answer all your questions as I do that eventually. But these videos right now that I'm posting once a week will be designed to link right up with the text that you are studying each week. So this video is about the road. So just to kind of place this in line with our unit, the unit that we're studying right now was basically to align with American literature 1920 to the present day. And with The Great Gatsby, we were studying the 1920s. Unfortunately, we were skipping ahead in time a little bit. We missed out on some World War II stuff, but that's all right. I'm sure you know all about World War II, especially when it comes to U.S. history in your U.S. history class. But The Road kind of fits in with this, although it was written pretty recently in 2006, it actually kind of fits in right after World War II, where nuclear technology is a thing, nuclear weapons are a thing, I said that correct, right? Nuclear technology is real, it's a thing, and some of the fears that come along with that, which is really, you know, what happens if we blow ourselves up, essentially, and what will the world look like? And so along comes the story of The Road, which, although it doesn't say specifically that it is in part because of a nuclear winter or things of that nature, I mean, it is a devastating global scale disaster that's kind of led to this father and son in this deeply kind of depressing, although slightly hopeful and human story. So that's where we're headed, and that's kind of where it fits in with this time period. That's why it's here. So The Road was written by Cormac McCarthy, and that's a picture of him, and that's a picture that comes from the film version. And the actor playing the man there is Viggo Mortensen. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, which I'm sure there's at least one of you out there, he's the one who plays Aragorn in that. Here are some vocab words, not very many this time, but just enough to understand. I would invite you to, if you do have something to take notes on, to write these vocab words down and add them either to your notes for the class or your vocab for the class. And my hope is that you'll continue studying vocab. So first off, we have apparition, which is a ghost or a ghost-like image. And we have dismembered, which means torn into pieces. And then lastly, enshroud. So you say that. That means to wrap up as cover or as with a blanket. So if you are writing those down, feel free to pause the video right now and then pick right up when you're done, because I'm going to move on. So a little bit of context for this story, and it does come from a book. What we have is an excerpt from the book near the beginning. But The Road was written in 2006. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2007, which is a pretty big award. I mean, you've heard of the Pulitzer Prize and, well, the Pulitzer Peace Prize, and those are all really big awards. And it won that in 2007 for fiction. It's a post-apocalyptic novel, which means that it takes place after some sort of apocalyptic event or a big disaster on a global scale. So the whole world is kind of in this aftermath of everything's terrible. But it takes place in this future where some global disaster has taken place. Like I said, we're never told exactly what it is, but we know it was pretty bad. Cormac McCarthy, the author of the book, seems to have written it as kind of a love letter to his son, and we can see that especially in the excerpt between the relationship between the man and the boy, which are never given names, by the way. That's an interesting style choice by McCarthy, but they're just referred to as the man and the boy through the entire book. The writing style of Cormac McCarthy, again, I'm assuming that you've read this already, but if you haven't, these are still important things. I would invite you to go read it before you watch this, but you're certainly welcome to do it either way. But the writing style of Cormac McCarthy is an interesting one. He is not a huge fan of punctuation marks. And maybe you can relate to him on some level for that. But he uses very few commas, no quotation marks at all. You'll see each time that someone talks, there's no quotation marks and there's no dialogue tag either. So there's no he said, she said. It's just left to us to keep track of who's saying what. And I think in a lot of ways that makes it, that places the burden on McCarthy or the author in making it so that we can easily identify who is talking based on what they are saying and how they're saying it. But yeah, he just believes that punctuation gets in the way a little bit, so he's decided, and that's not just in this book, but in all his books, he's just kind of decided to do away with a lot of punctuation. He's got periods, he's got capital letters at the start of each sentence, but he just thinks punctuation gets in the way. As a side note, that's not an okay for you to do it. He's a well-established, well-educated author, and so when you know all the rules, that's when you can decide to break some stylistically, but it's not an excuse to be lazy and leave punctuation out, just as a side note. So yeah, and also the two main characters, like I said, they don't have names throughout the entirety of the story. So this question, it would have been your blast question if we were still in class. So this would have been your blast question for the week. Why did dystopian or post-apocalyptic societies become popular at the end of the 20th century? And really this goes back to, oh, by the way, dystopian, we'll talk about in just a second, but it's the same idea of this society that's basically after civilization ends. But going back to this idea of really uncertain times when it comes to nuclear technology and other forms of advancing technology, is this fear that we're basically going to destroy our own planet, destroy ourselves in a way, and this will lead to this bleak, depressing society. So yeah, after World War II, and then even nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of ways that we could be in danger. I mean, people believe because of the technology, you know, whether you think of it's artificial intelligence, building robots is what's going to kill us in the end. A lot of times that's the subject matter of dystopian or post-apocalyptic stories. Or it could even be just the fact that climate change and destroying our environment. A lot of these fears weigh on people's minds, and the way that we express it to one another, the way that we talk about it with one another, oftentimes it has led to this push in the popularity for post-apocalyptic and dystopian fiction. And really was popular not only in literature but also in movies. And here I have a few different examples of that. So yeah, just briefly, a dystopia is the opposite of a utopia. A utopia is a perfect society. A dystopia is a community or society that's undesirable, that makes us scared, right? Either through totalitarian government, which means one person kind of took over everything and they're in charge, and that led to kind of the end of civilization, or an environmentally degrading one, which would be something like the Maze Runner, if you're familiar with that, where just the sun burned everything basically. And then we also have Mad Max, if you've seen that one. But yeah, the technology, we got an example there, WALL-E, right, where, I mean, we built so much technology, we just didn't need to do anything anymore, right? The people end up being fat and lazy and stay in their spaceships while the world kind of goes to, the world is garbage, right? And then lastly, maybe the most famous here is the Hunger Games, although it's a little dated now. That's more of a totalitarian society where someone's taken over. Anyway, those are some ideas. Hopefully that'll get you thinking about what it means to live in a post-apocalyptic world. A lot of these have fantasy elements or science fiction elements. The Road doesn't really have any of those. I mean, it really is just as if there's no new technology, nothing like that. Just if we blew ourselves up, basically, or some sort of event killed all human life and all in the environment as well, and just kind of lived in this dreary, bleak world. So two main takeaways from our discussion, as much as it can be a discussion with just me talking to you, but two main takeaways that come from two different story elements in the text. The first one is mood, and how McCarthy develops mood, and the second one is character development, and how McCarthy develops the only two characters really that we see in the excerpt. So first, mood. Hopefully you remember what mood is, but you definitely want to ask the question when it comes to mood. But when it comes to mood, you definitely want to ask yourself these questions. What's the setting like? And we've talked a lot about that. How does it affect the characters? Especially we can see in this kind of messy society, the darkness of everything definitely has an effect on the man and the boy. And then also, how does it make you feel as a reader? That's definitely important to an author, is making you feel something, and a lot of times what the characters are feeling. I have some examples here of quotes from the text that can help us to identify the mood. The first one is, "It was very cold. They sat huddled together, wrapped each in a blanket over their coats, and after a while the rain stopped and there was just the dripping in the woods." Second one, on the outskirts of the city, they came to a supermarket. A few old cars in the trash-strewn parking lot. They left the cart in the lot and walked the littered aisles. In the produce section, in the bottom of the bins, they found a few ancient runner beans and what looked to have once been apricots, long dried to wrinkled effigies of themselves. And then the last one, we should go, Papa. Can we go? Yes, we can go. I'm scared. I know, I'm sorry. I'm really scared. It's all right. We shouldn't have come. So those are just 3 examples. The first 2 are dealing with descriptions. The first 2 are dealing with descriptions of the text. And you can see that from the first 2, I mean, McCarthy really paints a grim picture. It's cold, right? It's raining, and they're huddled together in this blanket. So whenever things are cold and wet, the mood, the atmosphere that the author is trying to create really isn't bright, right? It would be very different if the sun was shining and the birds were singing, right? And then the second one, same thing. We've got a deserted grocery store. Everything's trashed. The food isn't good anymore. And then lastly, we have a conversation that happens. And again, no dialogue tags, so the way that, I mean, there's different ways that McCarthy lets you know who's talking. We should go, Papa. We definitely know that the boy is talking, so on and so forth. But anyways, the conversation that they're having points to a sense of unease that this boy has, just by them being in this old house. And even the man says, yeah, we shouldn't have come here at the end. So these are different ways that, different techniques that the author will use to set up the mood of the story. The second thing I want to talk about is character development. And these are some questions you should ask yourself when it comes to looking at characters and how they're developed over the course of a story. First, you want to identify who the main characters are. So in this case, we have the man and the boy. And then how do we learn about them? Through their actions and their dialogue. And how do the author's choices cause certain feelings or thoughts in the reader? Here's an example of one paragraph from the story that we learn a little bit about the characters. They ate their poor meal cold and lay down in their bedding with the lamp between them. He'd brought the boy's book, but the boy was too tired for reading. Can we leave the lamp on till I'm asleep, he said. Yes, of course we can. So there we get a sense of the relationship between the man and the boy, right? We get the sense that the man reads to the boy before he goes to sleep. There's a definite father-son relationship that's pretty important to them. And then also we get a sense that the boy is pretty scared of what's going on. Often children will want to leave the light on, but certainly this child wants to leave the lamp on because he's scared of his environment. Oh, by the way, I should point out that although this excerpt doesn't talk about it, this story is filled with dangerous things. This world is full of cannibals. Because all the food has gone to rot, people have started eating each other, essentially. And so the boy and the man and the boy really do have not only starvation to fear, but also people wanting to eat them, reasons to be afraid. So there is that. So an example of finding out a little bit about their character development comes from a conversation that the two have. And this is near the beginning when they find the Coca-Cola, when they find the soda. And so it says, the boy took the can. It's bubbly, he said. Go ahead. He looked at his father and then tilted the can and drank. He sat there thinking about it. It's really good, he said. Yes, it is. You have some, Papa. I want you to drink it. You have some. He took the can and sipped it and handed it back. You drink it, he said. Let's just sit here. It's because I won't ever get to drink another one, isn't it? Ever is a long time. Okay, the boy said. So we really get a sense of the boy is perceptive, but yeah, what is not said sometimes is more important than what's said, and the man definitely wants the boy to drink it because it's not something he's ever had, and he probably won't ever have it again. So hopefully all those things have helped us to answer the questions that you've been given. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this question. How did the author's choices in describing setting and characters impact your thoughts about the father and son and their chance of survival? So that's just a question to leave you thinking about. Again, hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully this has helped you to get a better understanding of how to answer the questions. I'll see you next week. Well, I won't see you. You'll see me.